Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
It took a little while, but we finally got a resolution on the Brendan Donovan sweepstakes. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. The Cardinals made the trade we've all been waiting for. They send Brendan Donovan to the Seattle Mariners, the place we all kind of knew he was going to end up all along. In return, bear with me here, T-Bone, they get Durangelo Senja. He is a ambidextrous pitcher. He's a righty. And he is one of the top 100 prospects in all of Major League Baseball. That is the prize in this trade. But beyond that, they also get Ty Pete, an outfield prospect, former first-round selection. Not one, but two competitive balance picks. They will be number 68 and number 72 in this year's Major League Baseball draft, which gives them like an extra $2.5 million to play with in their bonus pool. We'll get into that more here in just a little bit. They also get an outfield prospect in Colton Ledbetter from the Tampa Bay Rays. This took a ton of work. I can't even imagine the amount of legwork that went into making a deal like this possible for Chaim Bloom. The reason being, there were so many moving parts. First, Chaim had to get all of the expensive veterans off of the contract, off of the books first for the Cardinals. Then he can really focus in earnest on Brendan Donovan and who makes the most sense for him. Everybody wants him. Who is actually going to be the highest bidder, though? That always felt like it would probably be the Seattle Mariners. They had one of the top farm systems in baseball, so they've got this surplus value in their farm system, and they had a need at the position. And then the further we got into the offseason, the more their pivot points were coming off of the board, and it became clear, all right, that's the team. But how do they make it work? Is it going to be Senja plus another headliner from the Mariners? No. Now we know the Mariners wanted to trade Ben Williamson after acquiring Brendan Donovan. Williamson was a guy that was slated to be their third baseman, but they wanted an upgrade from him because he doesn't provide the offense that they were looking for. But the Cardinals didn't want Ben Williamson. So what do? Well, you hit a stalemate, and that's where they were at for a really long time. They found out, okay, well, the Rays want Ben Williamson, but the Rays weren't willing to give the Cardinals what they wanted in return to make this 3-team deal possible, so they hit another stalemate. And then finally, the Rays come back to the table. They've got Colton Ledbetter and a comp pick that ends up making this deal work. T-Bone, my biggest takeaway from the trade, A, it sucks that they had to trade Brendan Donovan. I hate that this is where they find themselves, but it was a necessary evil. B, I think they did really well in this deal. And C, I don't think this trade happens if John Mozeliak is still the Cardinals president of baseball operations. I think what you probably see, now this is me speculating, but what I think you probably see is either one of two things. One, they end up with Ben Williamson, who's playing third base for you this upcoming season, and Thomas Ajayci enjoy playing the outfield all year. Or B, they just keep Brendan Donovan and say, you know what, if we're not going to get what we're looking for, path of least resistance is we've got another year of control on this guy beyond 2026. We've got the deadline and then next offseason to potentially trade him. Let's just get to opening day. We'll figure this out at a later date. Kick the can down the road. How many times did we see that over the last few years with the previous administration in charge? Mo wasn't like this terrible general manager, but I do think we saw some times where little creativity was necessary and it was lacking at times. I think in this trade, Chaim Bloom has proven he is not only willing, but able to pull off deals that require some of that creativity.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure that deal ends up happening under John Mozeliak. And to your point on Donovan we've gotten to a point where Donovan should never been moved. It's a reminder of the failures of the end of the John Mozeliak era. But I'm with you because Mo had been lacking creativity over the last couple of years. And I even think it even extends past the Donovan move. I don't know if he does the Wilson Contreras move. I think he would have done Arenado. I think it's possible he would have done Sonny Gray. I don't know on Contreras. That's one that I'm kind of hesitant on. And of course, then you have the trickle down effects of what happens then, right? Burley's got to go somewhere. And then what happens with the rest of your outfield? Knowing Mo, he probably trades Newport while his value is at his lowest, which he had been known to do. But yeah, I love the creativity from Chaim Bloom and using kind of his connections of figuring out, okay, who are we going to bring into this? And he decides the Rays. And when he heard third baseman that's glove first, that's very good defensively, he probably went, oh, wait a minute, I remember who I used to work for that was good, that wanted that kind of player. So, yeah, and I'm with you. I think they did great on their return in this package. You get a right-handed pitcher that's got swing and miss stuff, that's a top 100 prospect. You get upside there. You look at the outfielder Pete that they acquired. He's got a power tool that's at least worth trying to experiment, especially because he's still young. I think he's just 19 years of age. So there's still plenty of time for him to learn and grow. He reminds me of what Baez was a couple years ago, Joshua Baez, where he had the power tool. He didn't connect a lot, though, right? Struck out a lot. Cardinals were able to work with him, and now he's one of their top prospects in their system. Get a lottery ticket, and then the 2 Comp B picks, which come your way, which is big for them for multiple reasons. One, it's multiple darts to throw at the dartboard when it comes to selecting. 2, it comes down to the bonus pool money that you get added into this, so you can spend a little bit higher on a riskier play on like a high school kid in the second round. Try and get him to sign rather than go get an NIL deal at like the SEC, for example, or in college. Well, you can also kind of shortchange some other guys as well throughout the process as well. They have the second most bonus pool money in MLB with those 2 additions of those draft picks. So I love what Chaim was able to do in getting this deal done, the creativeness, what he was able to get back in return, and just his overall ability to make this happen and be patient and wait for the Mariners and the Rays to come to him rather than kind of pulling the plug and saying, okay, well, we'll take a little bit less of the value in this deal. He waited and waited and waited, and he may have eventually gotten to that point where he would have had to settle maybe on just a smaller return from the Mariners, but he was patient and waited out both the Mariners and a little bit on the Tampa Bay Rays to make sure that this deal got done.
And that doesn't mean it's going to work.
No.
That's something that we should probably mention here is Brendan Donovan's probably going to be better. The odds are in favor of this. Brendan Donovan will probably be the best player dealt in this deal, not just for 2026, but long term. And that sucks. You shouldn't be in the business long term of consistently trading the guy that goes on to be the best player. That's not where you want to be as an organization, but it's where they're at. And so you had to trade a right now for a maybe in the future. And in return, the Cardinals are placing a lot of bets, small bets, on different players. Like you look back at the deal that they made for Wilson Contreras. They get a couple of different pitchers in that deal. You look back at the deal that they made for Sonny Gray, same thing. And now you get another pitcher in return for Brendan Donovan. Maybe they take a pitcher or 2 in the upcoming Major League Baseball draft that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to acquire because of the money that they now have to spend in the draft. So that's another small bet that you're able to make. And as you place a lot of these small bets, you're not going all in with anybody, but you have a lot of different outs to potentially have somebody or multiple somebodies that reach the big league level and impact your team when you're ready to contend again. And I loved the way that Chaim Bloom framed this in his press conference earlier in the week, where he said, listen, we were really trying to prioritize acquiring a player in this deal that would be able to impact a team that is winning in the playoffs. Not just be on the team, but be a real player for a team that is getting to and winning in the postseason. And they believe that Jurrangelo Cijntje can be that guy for them. He is somebody that scouts believe can be a mid-rotation starter at the major league level. You don't have to squint about it. He's a number 3 starter for a contender. That's what's in his future potentially. So I like what they were able to get there. Now the team starts to come into focus. There's going to be no Brendan Donovan. We can now have conversations about, okay, so what does this look like? What are the 2026 Cardinals going to be? The answer is probably not very good. But beyond that, just looking at playing time and how the lineup's going to shake out and who's going to play that where, there's a lot of playing time that is now opened up. First base is going to be Alec Burleson's to lose. Second base is some combination of J.J. Weatherholt, Nolan Gorman, and Thomas Saggese. I would assume the same thing will be true at third. It's basically those 3 guys for 2 spots. I will be very curious to see, though, because it's not just those 2 spots. It's also left field on opening day. We're not sure about Lars Nootbaar and whether or not he's going to be ready to go. DH, I don't know. Catcher, I think, is going to be Ivan Herrera. So you've got like left field, DH, second, and third, those 4 spots. And I think right now the players that'll at least be in consideration for those are Gorman, JJ Weatherholtz, Thomas Ajacey, and Fermin? Nathan Church?
Yeah, right-handed bat, they say.
I guess.
Or trade for.
I mean, it's... Your lineup could be pretty stable early on in the season, man. There are not a lot of options for Ollie Marmol. He's going to be looking around and being like, whew, even if I did want to take Jordan Walker out of the lineup today, big boy, you are going out there and you are going to have 600 plate appearances, hell or high water. That guy is going to play every day.
Yeah.
Nolan Gorman, it is time. There is no alternative. Even if you hate watching Nolan Gorman day to day, whether you're Ollie Marmol or a fan that's watching the Cardinals and paying your $100 this year for their TV deal, you're going to see him every single day because there's nobody else to turn to anymore. There is no Brendan Donovan that you could put into the lineup. There is no Wilson Contreras that's going to be out there every single day. There is no Nolan Arenado that's going to be out there. This is purely on the young guys. And the runway season, so to speak, was last year. This is the real runway season. Yep. Now we're really about to find out exactly what all of these players are capable of. And this is when it should happen. Ivan Herrera's 25. Alec Burleson, 27. Nolan Gorman, 25. Jordan Walker is about to be 24 this upcoming season. Victor Scott II is 25 years old. Thomas Ajacey is about to be 24. This is when you should have a pretty clear idea of what these guys are going to be as their prime starts to come to fruition.
Yeah, and you beat me to it because I was just thinking while you were running through there are no more outs. This truly is the year of runway. They probably should have saved it for this season because if Walker doesn't hit, there really is nobody to go to right now, both at the major league level and looking down in the minor leagues. Like Joshua Baez, if he doesn't hit in the first 2 months, odds are he's still probably not ready to come up here. Same for a Nolan Gorman. If Gorman doesn't hit, all right, who's replacing him? There's not an infielder down in the minor league system that's going to come up and just take his job, assuming Weatherholt is here already. This is the season where they find out, and they need to get the answers on these guys because I think Walker's ARB eligible, I think, going into next season, if I'm not mistaken. So you need to find out both, A, is he worth even going through the ARB process with, and let alone, is he really a piece that we're going to continue to build around? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they approach all of this season coming out of training camp. But you're right. It is going to be a year where the lineup gets set. And unless something surprises us, like Baez gets ready quicker than maybe we were expecting, or they make a move early on in the season, I'll just point out a catcher where they've got a ton of them in the system. It's going to be a lot of the same lineup. The people that have been saying, oh, he just needs to go with a regular 9 and stick with it. Oh, believe me, he's probably going to be doing it a lot this year, and you're probably not going to like the results of it because this is going to be a rebuild. And some of these guys may not just be major leaguers, but they're going to get an everyday opportunity to prove that they're not.
All right, let's play a game real quick. Who's the Cardinals' leadoff hitter on opening day, assuming Lars Nootbaar is not ready to go?
Oh, boy. I would guess Mason Wynn would be my guess. It's either him or Scott. I'm leaning Wynn.
That would be my guess as well.
Yeah.
I would probably say Mason Wynn 1, JJ Weatherholt 2, Ivan Herrera 3, Alec Burleson 4? Question mark? That's as good as I can make it, I think.
Yeah, you might be right. Like I was thinking in my head, like they probably won't hit Weatherholt that high early on, just because we've seen Ollie kind of work guys in. But okay, even if you don't do that, I got to go left, right. We know, right? So then it'd be Burley 2, Herrera 3. Who's 4?
I truly have no idea.
Like I think you're probably right. He has a good spring training. I think there is a chance he probably is the 2-hole hitter, and it's then Herrera, Burley 3-4.
I don't know where else you're turning. I think JJ Weatherholt. I don't know how you avoid him being in the top 5 of your lineup and probably in the top 3 of your lineup. Like, I think you can make a case for JJ Weatherholt as your leadoff hitter for the upcoming season. If you really wanted to, you could go JJ 1, Mason Wynn 2, Burley 3, Herrera 4.
Yeah.
I think that would actually make a lot of sense for them. But if they would prefer it to be a guy in Mason Wynn who's been up at the top of the order before, has shown an ability to do it, has that veteran ability, like, sure, I'm fine with that. But I think one of Wynn or JJ Weatherholt are probably the guys that profile best to be up there. If you want to try it out with Victor Scott, this is the year where you can do some of that, where you're experimenting. How do guys respond to the added pressure of being at the top of the lineup? That's fine too. I think when in a season where he is also experimenting with his swing, I would probably wait to do something like that. Take the pressure off of the results from his new swing. And then as you see some results start to come, maybe you get into like May or June, and now you try it out with him at the top of the lineup. I would prefer to go about it that way. But with Nootbaar potentially going to be missing a little bit of the early portion of the season, we don't know that for sure, but it seems likely. You're going to have to get creative with the way that you assemble this lineup.
And either way, like even if Nootbaar was available, right? Like you start to build out the lineup, guys are in spots that they shouldn't be because of the way you're building this roster out, right? Like even if I said what I did, where it was, hey, Ollie typically kind of eases a guy in a JJ Weatherholt. Okay, so if I'm not putting him in top 5, and if Nootbaar is not in there, that means like Gorman or Walker is hitting in the top 5. And the back of their baseball card tells you they are not a top 5 hitter in a lineup. So either way, you want to slice this. This is not a roster that is going to look like a typical 1 through 9 where we're going to have discussions of, okay, should this guy be hitting leadoff? Or what if you decided to flip 3 and 4? Or is this guy really a cleanup hitter? It doesn't matter. These guys are going to be put in spots that on a contending team, they would not be hitting in those scenarios.
We've heard them talk a lot about adding a potential right-handed bat, specifically for the outfield. Miguel Andujar has since signed elsewhere. We saw Harrison Bader sign as well. There's a couple of guys that are out there. I think Randall Grichuk, he's still out there as one option. I think if they're going to add somebody at this point, my bet would be it's a really small, low-level trade. Guy that probably has spent a little bit of time at the major league level, but a lot of his experience has been at AAA, who's just been passed up in his respective organization. That would be my bet today, just because I don't really see anything else out there that makes a lot of sense for the Cardinals. And some of these guys that have signed elsewhere, it's because they've got a clear spot. Like if you're the Cardinals, you can't promise playing time to any of these players that are out there. Miguel Andujar, I couldn't have promised him that he was going to start on this team. Yeah. I think he would, but when Lars Nootbaar returns, are you starting him over Newt? Probably not.
And the other thing, too, like you mentioned Grichuk, right? Like I had interest in Grichuk either last year or 2 years ago at the deadline because he's so good against lefties. When he's right, he can do damage to left-handed pitchers. Are you really platooning anybody? Right? It's not even a starting lineup job because I don't even think Grichuk's that at this point in his career. He has to look for a platoon somewhere. I don't even think you can realistically offer up a platoon because it doesn't make sense, because you want to play Victor Scott so he can continue to learn at the big league level. You want to find out what Jordan Walker is. And for Lars Nootbaar, I think you know what Nootbaar is. It's about boosting back up his value, right? To where it is either, okay, we can keep him and make him a part of this, or if you boost his value back up to the Nootbaar that we saw 2 years ago, that's a guy teams are going to want both at the trade deadline and potentially in the offseason if you decide to move him.
I wouldn't be opposed to them going into the season with what they've got.
I wouldn't either. That's why I find it interesting that they have so much interest in adding one.
I could see this where, hey, let's go into spring training, see how this all works out. Let's slow play it. And then we've seen other teams. I think the reason why a lot of Cardinals fans are like, no, you got to get it now is because previously they just get into the season like, all right, that's what you got. Get this to June, and then maybe we'll talk about adding somebody.
Won't do anything till July.
Waiver claims, maybe, but trades, no. We make calls in mid-July. That's when we start making calls with other teams. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case any longer. I think you could see Chaim make some kind of a trade in, early May if they're like, you know what, this isn't working. We really do need another right-handed bat. We don't want to rush anybody from our minor league system up to the major league level. But until then, hey, let's see what Sajaci looks like in the outfield.
Yeah.
Give him some opportunities to go out there, play in left field. He's athletic enough. Let's see if it works. Let's see what this thing looks like with Ivan Herrera too. Maybe he's not a catcher. And they decide by May, hey, probably outfield or first base is going to be the long-term landing spot for Ivan Herrera. And if that's the case, well, that could have a trickle-down effect on Alec Burleson, for example. Maybe they say, first base is the better spot for him. Burley, we wanted you to come into the year and be our first baseman. You were a more than capable outfielder last year. Let's go ahead and put you back out there, see what it looks like with that configuration. It's just going to be a lot of time spent figuring stuff out this year. What are the best landing spots for these players long term? How do they fit into a roster and a batting order, ideally long-term? What are we missing? What do we still not have on this roster that we need for 2027 and beyond? That's what this season should be all about. It's about fact-finding and building for 2027 and beyond.
Boy, this conversation made me think I am glad I am not the manager of the club on an expiring deal at the end of the year, because I don't know what I'm being judged on to earn a contract extension. So good luck, Ollie Marmol.
Yeah, it's not an easy job not an easy situation to be put into. He's making millions of dollars to do it, so I think he'll be just fine. Coming up next, the Cardinals have achieved basically all of their offseason goals at this point in time. Maybe the one that's notwithstanding would be the right-handed bat that they would like to add to the outfield. So what grade would you give them for what they were able to accomplish? We'll get into that, give you our grades coming up next here on the Redbird Report. So the Cardinals had very clear goals coming into the offseason. What do we need to accomplish? What are we hoping to do? They wanted to go out there and trade Wilson Contreras. They wanted to trade Sonny Gray. They wanted to trade Nolan Arenado. And they were hoping to maximize the return for Brendan Donovan. They accomplished all four of those goals. When you look at what they were able to get in return, T-Bone, and you look at the way that the roster sets up now, not just at the big league level, but also their prospects that they were able to add to the farm system, what grade would you give them, not just for the Brendan Donovan deal, but for what they were able to accomplish this offseason overall?
I would give the offseason an A. I love the fact that, one, I'll start with they were able to move Arenado, which we had talked about on this podcast. I wasn't convinced was possible. Not so much that I didn't think they would be willing to eat the money on the deal. I just didn't know if they'd find a suitor. And somehow Chaim did the impossible and not only traded him, found multiple suitors apparently for Nolan Arenado. Then he gets creative in the money he's willing to eat on the Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras deals to get some pitching that comes in and both helps them in the now. And as you had kind of said in our first segment, they targeted some tools on some pitchers as well, like the Brandon Clark that they acquired in either the Gray or Contreras deal. He's a guy that has the tools of, boy, this guy could have electric stuff. If it all clicks, we may have just found another starter for us in future years. If it doesn't, and he's still adequate, good velo, could maybe be a left-handed bullpen arm for us. Like, they targeted tools, and they did so in a system that didn't have a lot of that big fastball, guys that can spin it down in the minor leagues. They were able to accomplish that in some of these trades by getting creative and eating some money. And then on top of that, by what they're able to get in return for Brendan Donovan, I think it's an A of an offseason. They were never going to be adding anything, in my opinion, that was going to be significant towards this year. But it was all about just reloading everything. And to get the farm system from 18th a year ago, according to Baseball America, to number 2 by what they have done this offseason is impressive work from Chaim Bloom. Now, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work, but it's the right process, right? You'll talk a lot about process and results. This was a good process that we'll see if the results end up being good with it as well.
8 of the Cardinals' top 20 prospects in their system, according to Keith Law, have been added to their system since the MLB draft of last year. So that's not just the offseason, but also including the draft from last year. That's basically half of your top 20 prospects.
Yeah.
That's good work, man. And many of those, Drangelo Sanger, who's at number 5, Fajardo, who's at number 14, Clark, Pete, those were all guys that were added to the system this offseason via trades. To add 4 top 18 prospects into your system, and you traded away 3 guys that are on big money deals, and Brendan Donovan, who I love Brendan Donovan. He's a very good, overqualified super utility player. So to get these kinds of returns is really impressive, but it goes even beyond that. I said, starting in like July, hey man, I would really like to see the Cardinals go out there and sign somebody like Dustin May. I don't know who that pitcher is, but somebody that's young with upside, and if they can regain some of that form, recapture some of what they once were, you could either add them to the core, or probably more likely trade them and add even more prospects into your system at the deadline. What'd they do? And just get some version of Dustin May. They got Dustin May. And then you go to the bullpen. We said the same thing. Man, spend a few $1,000,000, buy yourself a prospect.
See if you can do what you did in the last 2 years with Kittredge and Phil Maton.
Exactly.
Who they moved last year.
And guess what they did? They went out there and got a big fastball in Ryan Stanek, the exact kind of reliever that's typically sought after once you get to the trade deadline. So they add 2 pitchers on veteran deals that you could then flip at the trade deadline. They give themselves some more out. They don't sell low on Lars Nootbaar or Nolan Gorman, both of whom could once again become sought-after commodities at this year's deadline or become pieces of the core moving forward, depending on what happens this year. And they sold high on Brendan Donovan. They sold off all of the guys, got creative with some of those contracts that they didn't want on the books. A+ offseason, given what their expectations are, given what their stated goal has been. If their goal for this year was to win the World Series, this was an F of an offseason. It was horrible, but that's not their goal. And they made that very clear from the first time that Chaim Bloom spoke to the media this offseason. And that is something that I think at times in the past, many times in the past, we have seen the Cardinals get up there and say one thing and then do something very different in the offseason. And then you leave a bit confused on, all right, you say this is your goal, but then I look at the roster that you've put in place, and I don't understand how I'm supposed to believe that this team can accomplish what you're setting out to do. And then you look at the competition out there and it's like, you just don't stack up. You don't have the players. You don't have the dudes to go out there and compete with the Dodgers or the Phillies or the Braves or so many of these other teams. And now they don't have that. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to compete with those teams that I just mentioned. But they're really competing in a very different market, which is, hey, who has the top farm system in Major League Baseball? They're doing pretty well in that competition. We're in the top 5 or so in Major League Baseball, depending on where you look.
Yeah, and if you would have told me coming into the year that they would end up with going into the offseason, that they would end up with a top 5 farm system based on most rankings, I would have probably laughed and said no. And the reason I say that is because I didn't think they were going to get as many upside plays in the Contreras and Gray deals. They got one, and they were interesting names that kind of fit into their top 20, but that also helped kind of boost up that farm system. I would have thought there was no way they were going to be able to do that. I thought it was going to be Donovan's the one where you get your best return. If you dump dump Arenado, it's probably for a bag of baseballs. They somehow even got a name in that deal. And then if you were to trade Contreras and Gray, I thought it was going to be the same thing, right? How much money is ownership going to be willing to eat? I thought they'd eat some, not as much as they ultimately did, which is what helped them get the prospects in return. And like you said, in their free agent process, I think they did it right? Looking for guys that you hope that if things work out, you're able to trade them. This wasn't no offense to these guys, this wasn't like signing a Kyle Gibson or a Lance Lynn on a 1-year deal. Okay, if that guy works out, like that's a number 4 or 5. No one's really targeting that at a deadline. Dustin May, if everything clicks for him, he's a guy that could even be a starter in a postseason series. That's how good his stuff can be if he's healthy. Huge if, but worth the risk if you're the Cardinals for where you're at right now in your life cycle as an organization.
They're starting to make the bets that are smart.
They're finally playing modern baseball, or building towards modern baseball. The thing that Mo had continued to push down the road by going after sinkers and getting the ball on the ground. And hey, we're going to have guys that hit for some contact. And we're drafting big leaguers, not guys that have huge upside to where they could become stars. But if they fail spectacularly. No, that's changed now.
The Cardinals were playing penny stocks, where it's very low risk, pretty low reward. If you win on those, you don't get a ton out of it. The Cardinals now are doing the thing that a lot of other people, like, it's smart investing. They're investing in Apple. They're investing in Microsoft. They're investing in the big stocks that are out there right now. And yes, everybody else is doing it too, but there's a reason for it. It's smart. When it pays off over time, you keep making these good bets. You get a better return on your investment. So it costs more. Like, Dustin May costs a hell of a lot more than going out and getting the next 35-year-old pitcher that throws 93 and sinks it and gets a ton of ground balls. It's more expensive. And so there's, like, quote unquote more risk because it's more expensive, but there's really not more risk. The same issues are potentially there with Dustin May that existed with Kyle Gibson or a Lance Lynn or an Eric Fetty. All of these guys could blow up. They could get hurt. It could not work out for you. Look at Eric Fetty a year ago, man. That guy looked like somebody that was going to be a consistent 180-inning arm, 4 or 5 ERA. It completely blew up on him. And when you have very little margin for error, that's the downside. With Dustin May, he hasn't been very good in the past. He's also had some legitimate explanations for it. And if the stuff returns to form, upside's still pretty darn good for a guy like Dustin May. So I'm glad they're making the bets that are a little higher upside than what they had been making previously. All right, coming up next, we had mentioned Cardinals are considered a top 5 farm system in all of Major League Baseball, according to most of the third-party publications out there. One of them has them as the number 2 farm system in baseball. What does that mean? What can we learn from some of these previous top farm systems across baseball? We'll talk about that next year on the Redbird Report. Cardinals right now, according to Baseball America, have the number 2 farm system in all of Major League Baseball. It's a nice place to be. Not quite number 1, but right there next to them. Now, they're not that high in some of the others. I think it was number 7 in Major League Baseball, according to Kylie McDaniel. Some of the others, they're somewhere in that like 2 to 12 range, which speaks to how close a lot of those are. I think they bumped up from 9 to 7 after the Donnie trade, according to Kylie McDaniel. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea. These things fluctuate over time, and there's not a ton of differentiation between many of those in that top 10-ish. The reason that I wanted to bring this up, T-Bone, is twofold. One, that's impressive. That's good work by Chaim Bloom and his team to already have them that high. It's the highest that they've been ranked in the Baseball America farm system rankings since 2013, when they were at number 1. In 2013, the Cardinals had Carlos Martinez, Michael Wacha, Matt Adams, and Steven Piscotty as their top prospects in their system. I would say all 4 of those guys, to some degree, worked out once they got to the major league level. So I wanted to go back. It's really hard to find the archives of like the full top 30. So my goal was to find out, all right, what did the number 2 farm system in Baseball America's rankings look like over the last decade plus? I couldn't find it, but I found the number 1 farm system in Major League Baseball dating back to 2011. So I wanted to bring these up just to give you an idea. When you have a system that's ranked this highly by Baseball America specifically, who I think is the best doing it, what does it mean for you? 2011 number 1 farm system in Major League Baseball, T-Bone, was the Kansas City Royals. The following players were among their top prospects: Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, Will Myers, Danny Duffy, Salvador Perez. In other words, the core that earned them a World Series appearance 3 years later and a World Series victory 4 years later. 2012, the Washington Nationals had the top farm system in baseball: Bryce Harper, Rendon, Robbie Ray, Derek Norris, Tanner Roark. 2013, I mentioned it was the Cardinals. 2014 was the Pirates. This was a core that did not quite work out for them the way that they expected it to, but that's by their own doing. Jamison Tyone was their number 1 prospect. Then Josh Bell, Tyler Glasnow, Austin Meadows.
3 of those became good players. And
yeah, I mean, really, to some degree, all of them.
They might be the cautionary tale. We haven't even gotten beyond this, but the rest of the list, they're probably the cautionary tale of when you don't spend, when you're ready to win, right?
And trading.
That trading too, yeah, because they moved.
The Chris Archer deal.
Yeah, Glasnow in that deal. Yeah.
Austin Meadows.
Oh, yeah, I forgot Meadows was in that deal as well. Yeah. Okay, yeah, don't do what they did.
Don't get overly aggressive when you're not ready to go all in. All right, the Cubs were 2015. We know how that story ended.
Worked.
Bryant, Schwarber, Gleyber Torres, Eloy Jimenez, Soler. They're the opposite of what happened with the Pirates, though. They traded the right guys. They traded Eloy in a deal that ultimately kind of worked out for them. The Dodgers, Seager, Bellinger, Buehler, Urias, Verdugo. They got aggressive with Verdugo, traded him for some guy named Mookie Betts.
Yeah, not bad.
That worked out all right for them. The Braves were the top farm system in 2017 and 2018, then won the World Series in 2019. Padres were the top farm system in 2019 with Tatis, Luis Urias, Patino. I don't remember him. Luis Patino and Chris Paddock. Kyle Quantrill as well was a part of their system. 2020 and 2021.
I can see, by the way, on the Padres, why, what's his name? Preller was wheeling and dealing all the time with that list.
2020 and 2021, it was the Rays with Wander Franco, Randy A., Shane McClanahan, and Shane Baz. Pretty damn good. 2022 was the Mariners. It was the core that ultimately went to the World Series last year. Julio Rodriguez, George Kirby, Matt Brash, Brandon Williamson, and Noelvi Marte, who I believe they traded in that deal to Cincinnati for Luis Castillo. 2023, the Orioles. 2024, the Orioles. And then this past season, it was the Boston Red Sox. Moral of the story is this. When you are ranked incredibly highly in these farm system rankings by Baseball America, it is not by accident. Individual rankings, like the player rankings, guy that's ranked 9th versus 27th, man, that stuff is a crapshoot. It's really hard to know which players are going to work out and which players aren't. I'm a recruiting guy in college football. I like following that stuff. It's the same thing. If you go back through and look at all the 5 stars over the last 10 years, you can find a ton of busts. But there are like 35 stars every year, and roughly like 15 of them go on to become first-round picks in the NFL draft. That's a pretty damn good hit rate. In other words, I got a 50-50 chance if I get a 5-star on campus, the guy's going to be a stud. If I get a 3-star on campus, it's like a 10% chance or a 5% chance. The same thing is true for the prospect rankings. If you've got a guy that ranks in the top 10 of the pipeline, you've got a really good chance of getting a future all-star player at the major league level, like a 50% chance. It sounds low, but it's really high compared to a guy that's at the back portion of the top 100. He maybe has a 10% chance of getting to an all-star game at some point in his career. So when you put all of that together, now you're ranking based upon the overall systems. It fluctuates much less because now you're making bets on this large quantity and quality of players in each individual system. So when you're ranked this highly, it does speak to what the future of your organization could look like. Man, I think basically all of these teams outside of the Rays, who, man, Wander Franco played a big part in that, and that's off-field stuff that you can't take into account if you're Baseball America. And probably the Pirates went on to have not just some success, like legit postseason success that either did or could have led to pennants for their respective teams. That's what the Cardinals are trying to build right now.
And the biggest thing in all those, too, by the way, and I guess you could say that Cardinals one doesn't fall into what I'm about to say. The big thing, though, on what these happened, sure, they had the big quantity that you're talking about, and they did develop some pretty good complementary pieces. They also developed the star, though. That was the driving force. Like, going all the way back to the Royals, I wouldn't say Moustakas and Hosmer were that, but Salvador Perez ultimately became that. For the Nationals, dude, Bryce Harper, I mean, come on, that guy became a stud. Chris Bryant won an MVP. Corey Seager, that same guy. Bellinger, honestly, was that guy early on. Acuna, a driving force in that. Tatis, that. Julio Rodriguez, that for the Seattle Mariners. Big driving force for them to get to the World Series last year. That's the big thing. And you mentioned the Rays. The Rays, it was going to be Wander Franco till his off-field stuff occurred. But, like, yes, these systems typically will lead to what you're talking about, a lot of success, and hopefully teams that end up with pennants. You need someone of this group to emerge as a star, though. And the hope for the Cardinals, the guy that they have circled, is J.J. Weatherholt. They hope he can become that, because otherwise you kind of end up like the 2013 Cardinals, and they did. They got to the pennant in 13, right? 15, they were good. 13, they got there before these guys were here, I think.
Correct.
They were good, but the reason that they weren't a team that ended up getting to the World Series was they didn't have a star that developed internally. Now, they filled it externally. To be fair, they did that with Matt Holliday, and eventually it led to Goldie and Arenado. But if you don't develop it internally, then you have to go external like that Cardinals team did. So that was the takeaway that I had in this. These systems were high because, yes, first off, they did a very good job of building a good group of players that came up at the same time. They hit, though, and one of them developed into a superstar that really took them to the next level.
If you're the Cardinals, I would look at the Braves from 2017-18. Now, I don't think they have an Acuna in their system right now. Like, Albies was probably the next closest guy that was expected to become a superstar. Albies has a big name. If you just go back by the numbers, and I stripped away the name, stripped away the prospect pedigree, Albies is a really good player. I don't think he's a superstar.
Agreed.
In terms of his overall production. Austin Riley is, though, and Riley was 5th on that group at the time. So the reason I bring that up, like, that's the thing for the Cardinal system right now. You can go through. Joshua Baez might be your version of Austin Riley. Maybe Rainiel Rodriguez is your version of Austin Riley, where they're not the top pedigree guys right now in your system, but they do have maybe even more upside than what JJ Weatherholtz does in terms of what he could ultimately be. Maybe Weatherholtz is your version of Ozzie Albies, where he's just a really good player. You can build around him, you put him at second base or third base, and for the next decade, you're thrilled that he's a part of your roster. I would not be surprised by that at all. And then you have guys that come through, Rodriguez, Joshua Baez, whoever it may be that's further down the list, and they surprise a bit, but they've got that pedigree of, all right, they're coming up, they've got the raw tools to become stars at the major league level. I think that's what you've got to hope for if you're the Cardinals. I do have one other question for you, T-Bone, because the Cardinals, we know, are not expected to be good this season, and they're building around all of these young players that are going to grow through their system, and the hope is they can continue to invest around them because they've basically got a blank canvas on their salary sheet beyond the 2026 season. They have almost nobody they've invested in long term. I've not talked to you off air about this just yet, but the Cardinals TV deal, it was just announced earlier this week. They will be going with MLB as their distributor this year, which means they are now paid not necessarily through just this blanket rights fee, where they are handed a check every year for, I think they were expecting like a $70 million check this upcoming year from FanDuel Sports, basically. That's going to change now, the way that they get the money. Now it's through subscriptions and advertisements and other fees associated with that. Those subscriptions will come in based upon the quality of the team. We see this in our industry, right? The interest of the team is at its peak when the team is good, when there are star level players to follow, etc. Do you think that the new TV deal for the Cardinals will actually incentivize them to try to get better quicker because of the way that they get people to subscribe to this new service, where previously there was really no incentive? It was like, yeah, they need people to come out to the ballpark. Don't get me wrong. That's part of their revenue stream as well. But you get a blanket check every year, no matter how good or bad you are, no matter how many people are watching at home, you get this check from FanDuel Sports. Now you've got to work for that money. You've got to get fans to invest in your product. And if they deem it not worthy of their time or their money, they can just shut you off, and they turn off that spigot that is your fountain of revenue, effectively. And you then have to find new streams of revenue, or you just stay where you're at right now. How do you feel about that?
So I do find this to be an interesting conversation because it's across multiple teams that have this. I hope this doesn't feel like I'm trying to kick the can down the road on the answer. I think it depends on what happens if Manfred can get his envisioned national, everybody's rights come together and we sell that as a huge package, which I think is at the end of the 27 or 28 season, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think there's going to be motivation early on from the Cardinals to do it, because they may view it as, I think the way they will approach it is, we don't want a deficit spend, which is what we might be doing early on, because even though you may spend on the team, people want to see the result first sometimes before they start to really invest into the product. So I think they will be hesitant to do that, and then hope that the national package idea that Manfred has of gathering all the local rights together and like selling it to ESPN, for example, to where that's where it becomes your home and ESPN cuts the check. I think that's the hope for the Cardinals, is that goes through, and then they don't have to do what you're talking about, which is really work for it. It basically goes back to the old model, kind of, where it is you get a guaranteed check every year, but instead of it being through a cable provider, it is through ESPN themselves. But the reason why I wanted to say I'm not trying to kick this can down the road. If that doesn't happen, which I'm not sure it's going to, because Rob seems to think he can get all the 30 owners to agree to that. I don't know why the Yankees would. I don't know why a team like the Dodgers, the Cubs, who own their own markets or own television stations, would do that. If that doesn't happen, then I think it could occur. I think then it could become a Cardinals do, if they haven't gotten out of it already, say, okay, we need to start spending on this so that we actually can get this product to where people want to pay for a subscription through our system. Otherwise, we're just going to be stuck here in mediocrity and we're not going to end up getting out of this. So I think it just depends. I think they will wait to see if this big national television deal comes through with the local rights that Manfred's been talking about. If it doesn't, then they may take that approach that you are referring to.
I think that this could ultimately be the best thing that happened for fans for a few different reasons. One, as you look at the way that you're able to consume the product, it is just easier to consume now than it ever has been previously. If you were somebody that was in a blackout restricted area and you couldn't watch Cardinals games, which was ridiculous, but it was the rules as they were written by Major League Baseball and their partners previously, you now in their viewing area are not blacked out at all. If you want to watch Cardinals games and you're in their viewing area, you can now do so via cardinals.tv. That is available for you. You just have to pay either like $20 a month or $100 for the season. So just if you want to consume the product, it's better for you as a fan. And two, if this does end up becoming the new product for the Cardinals, to your point, beyond this year, it incentivizes them to get you back to the ballpark and to get you interested in their product as much as humanly possible, which then pushes them into places that they're probably uncomfortable to go to. If they're just going to keep sitting on their hands and doing this year after year where, hey, we want this sustainable way of winning. We want to build the Rays model, and they don't have superstars that you can latch onto, and they're not spending, and you go into every season wondering like, can they be good? We're not really sure. And you play the what if game every year. Well, that's not going to get fans to buy in. It's going to take a long time for that to really work. This would potentially push them to go to those places that John Mozeliak used to call his puke point and say, all right, let's go sign X, Y, or Z via free agency, or let's go make that trade. We've built this farm system up. We've got all these prospects in our system. Now let's cash in on 3 of them. The way that the Mariners just did, for example, for Brendan Donovan. Let's go make that trade for our star. We didn't produce one from within. That sucks. Let's go now acquire one from somebody else. I do wonder if this is the kind of thing that, unlike in the previous builds that they've had, they would be pushed to do this because they need to, because they need your revenue. They need your money in order to make everything work financially.
Yeah, I'll find it fascinating because I think it is the way that it probably should be viewed. But I think if you're the Cardinals, you can always just kind of break this thing even or make this profitable, and you get revenue sharing if you miss out on it. Like, I don't know that, like, why have we not seen some teams that have already been kind of pushed to this model not start pushing forward, right? The Twins are like in debt and are like desperate to try, and they had to sell part of the organization. They are trying to sell they've got to sell this package as well, and they've done nothing in the offseason, and they don't feel motivated to do it. I don't know if there will be enough still to drive the DeWitts to make sure that they do that. I think they will just continue to push along and say, one, we'll wait to see if the national deal comes and it does cut us the check that we're looking for, or B, they will just continue to operate on, all right, whatever our subscription base is and whatever our attendance is, that kind of just goes by what the payroll is. And if that means we build a good baseball club or it doesn't, we're still a profitable organization. So that's what we care most about.
We have officially made it. We made it through the offseason. It is February 5th.
Felt like it took forever.
It did. Brendan Donovan has been traded. Wilson Contreras has been traded. They made all the moves they said they were going to make.
Who's the jersey you're going to get this year?
I'm not going to get one this year. I'm going to wait a little while.
Oh, wow.
I had a Donnie jersey. Yeah, it is what it is. The next time that we talk, the Cardinals will be 2 days away from their first spring training game. The Cardinals will be out at Jupiter. They'll be getting ready for their first game, and then we'll have a few weeks to be able to find out, what this team is capable of in 2026. We all think we know. Find out if maybe there's a little bit more in there than what we're currently anticipating. Thanks to all of you for going on this wild ride with us during the offseason. It's been our first full year of doing the Redbird Report the way that we have. We've now gone through a full season. We've switched studios. We've got Zane on board. We've got T-Bone on board. We appreciate each and every one of you for making this possible. If you have not done so yet, before the start of spring training, make sure to download this podcast whenever you can. Subscribe to this podcast on the audio feed as well. That helps us out a ton. And if you would subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. That's a great place to be able to get it. You can watch us, whether it's on your phone, on your computer, at home. You can put it on the TV as well. It's a beautiful setup in here, so that helps us out a ton as well. For Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.